Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome here today. As you heard from Kemi, this government is unashamedly pro-business. It's as simple as that. Earlier this year, I set out my priorities that I wanted to deliver. One of those was to grow the economy, and we're all here today because government can't do that alone. We can only deliver that growth if we all work together with you. Now, I know the last year has not been easy. Right? We're all dealing with the aftermath of COVID, the impact that had on supply chains, a war in Ukraine, the impact on energy prices. But I believe we are turning a corner. And as I spoke to so many of you this morning, I think you can see that in your businesses too. Optimism and confidence returning. People looking forward to brighter days ahead. Now, our job is to build on that positive momentum. And that's why we need to create the conditions for all of you to succeed, to drive that growth. We need to make sure that the UK is the best place to start, to scale, or to grow a business. And we're doing that in a few ways. First of all, we need more investment. That's why the Chancellor ensured that we have the lowest rate of corporation tax in the G7. But combined with that, introducing full expensing. So this is pretty much the most attractive place to invest anywhere in the world. Next, we need more innovation, because that's the best long-term driver of growth. So not only is the government increasing its investment in R&D to record sums, doing interesting new things, like the creation of a new high-reward, high-research agency, ARIA. But we're also reforming our R&D tax credits to make sure that they keep pace with how your businesses are actually innovating, so that for every pound we invest, you invest more alongside us. We also need smarter regulation. Think about it, the industries that are driving growth, changing in front of our eyes, day by day, month by month, whether that's in life sciences, where we want to make sure that drug discovery happens here, whether that's in AI, data and technology, or indeed, financial services. In all those areas and more, we need to make sure that this is the country where innovation is happening fastest, happening safest, that the jobs are being created here, that the new products and services of the future that are going to transform our lives are all being invented here. We also need to make sure that we keep trading. That's always been our history. And that's why I was delighted that recently we joined the CPTPP trade partnership, the first big non-Pacific economy to do so, because we know where future growth is going to come from, and we want to make sure that all of you, our country, our companies, can be part of it and take advantage of it. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we need to make sure that all of your businesses have access to the skills and the talent that you need to drive growth. That means thinking about skills in a radically different way to how we used to in the past, because it's not linear anymore, that you go from school to college to university and have a job for life. You know that. We need to make sure that at every stage of people's careers, they get the support, the investment they need, to get the skills they need to power your businesses to greater heights. But alongside that, we unapologetically want to make sure that this country is a beacon for the world's most successful, talented people. We want to attract the best and the brightest from around the world to come here, to research, to study, to create new businesses, to come and work in your growing companies. That's the migration system that we'll deliver. Now, if there's one overarching message that I want all of you and everyone watching to take away from today, it is this. We want businesses, small and large, to know that this government has got your back. Now, you saw that from me as Chancellor during COVID. And I don't just say these things because that's my own background. I say that because I know, this government knows, that it's you, it's your businesses that create the jobs, the opportunities, and the prosperity that our country depends on. It's an extraordinarily special thing that you all do. And I and the government are very grateful to you for doing it. So that's what we want to talk about today. We are here to listen to all of you, to understand your views, and then, crucially, to make sure that we act on them. Because I know that you want what I want, and that's to build a better future, a better country for our children and our grandchildren. And we can't do that without your help. Thank you very much. Okay, right, let's open this up for some questions. I think there are some mics roaming around. You can put your hands up in the air, and please do introduce themselves. I might know who you are, but we want to make sure everyone knows who you are. Shall we start down here? Venkat.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prime Minister C.S. Venkatakrishnan, CEO of Barclays. Growth is very important for all of us, and for you. And here you have represented the businesses across the UK. How can the government and businesses work together to mobilize private capital, which is so much more important today, both domestically and globally?
Brilliant. Right, well, Venkat, great place to start. Look, Venkat, Barclays, financial services. That's partly my background as well. And you know what? It should be everyone's interest for us to support our financial services industry. I'm really proud of our financial services industry. It's one of the best in the world, if not the best in the world. And it's not just about what happens in the square mile in the city, even though that's where many of you in this room will have come from. Because financial services employ, and professional services employ something like 2 million people in our country. Think about that, 2 million people. And do you know what's even more interesting? Something like 2/3 to 3/4 of all those people are not in London and the South East. Right? Those jobs in financial and professional services are being created all across our country, in every part of our union, and that's why it's important that we continue to support the industry to do what it does. And not just for its own sake, because actually, Venkat, as your question goes to, is that industry allows our companies, our growing companies, to get the money they need to fuel their expansion. So it plays an incredibly important part in delivering that future growth. So what are we doing? Well, one thing we're doing, and I can see Amanda here in the front row, is after Brexit, we're able to reform Solvency II. Right? That was a reform that we inherited. After Brexit, we're able to reform it for the insurance industry. What does that mean? It means we can unlock tens of billions of pounds of capital that can be deployed into more productive uses. That's what the Chancellor's delivering. That's going to be transformational for our economy. But not only that, we're not stopping there. There's 30 more things like that the Chancellor's also doing. So if you've got a chance, go and look at his speech, the Edinburgh reforms, wholesale capital markets, our stock markets. You name it, we're looking at it to see how we can ensure that we have the most competitive and dynamic financial services industry in the world, because that's how we'll deliver on what you're asking, Venkat. It's how we'll make sure that the billions, if not trillions of pounds of capital that exist can all be invested in those companies to make sure they can deliver growth and jobs here in the UK. It's one of the fantastic opportunities of Brexit. We are seizing that opportunity and working with you. That's how we're going to fuel the growth of the future. Right, who's next? Perfect, yes.
Hello, my name's Anya Highmarch. I'm CEO and founder of a fashion company. And my question is about the creative industries, if I may. I think we all accept that the creative industry is one of the fastest growing sectors of the UK economy. And I think it's fair to say also that actually they're the marketing arm of the UK and very much the hook of the reason to visit and invest. It would be very easy, however, to lose our edge. And losing your edge, a bit like sunburn, happens before you realize it. So my question is, how will you support the creative industries for growth and for investment?
Brilliant. Well, Anya, first of all, thanks for being here, and what a pleasure it is to meet you. You represent something that's incredible about our country, and not just an amazing entrepreneur, but also in a sector which is showcasing, as you said, what's brilliant about our country around the world. So thank you for everything you've done for our country, and it's glad that we recognize that. And thank you also, I should say, probably, for providing many great birthday and Christmas presents for my wife over the years. So I appreciate that too. I can say that to you in person. I talked earlier about financial services and others. There are a handful of industries that we are really world-class at. And we should take a moment to celebrate that. The creative industries are one of those, right? Whether it's fashion, whether it's marketing, whether it's branding, whether it's film, TV production, music, all of those things are things that we are known around the world for being brilliant at. And it's not just about soft power and our cultural exports, it's also about jobs. Several 100,000 jobs here at home in that industry. And in your industry in particular, a couple of things I'd say is, one is education. Right, making sure that we're providing a pipeline of the most talented people to enter those industries. And in fashion education in particular, and you know this better than I, if you look at kind of the global top 10 fashion universities, I think about 6 of them are all here in the UK. So making sure that we do that, I think, is really important. The other thing is having a tax system that supports investment in film and TV production. Another thing that the Chancellor did in the budget, and the Culture Secretary's here as well, was make sure that all our tax credit regime for film and TV production tax credits are competitive. We're attracting investment here, and you can see that it's working. Pinewood, several £100 million investment. One of many of you in this room involved in that industry investing in the UK. And the thing that I hear from everybody is tax regime needs to be good, but then we need skills. We need a pipeline of talent. We will keep investing here in the UK as long as you're training the next generation of visual effects specialists or whatever it might be. And that's the thing we need to get right. And I was actually just visiting the London Screen Academy, which is a school in North London that's training the next generation of all those people. They're so optimistic about their futures, and we need to make sure that we're replicating institutions like that across the country so young people from lots of diverse backgrounds can enter into this industry and fuel your growth for years to come. Because you're right, that's how we advertise ourselves around the world, and we're lucky to have people like you to do it. Right, who is next? Well, I can't see a microphone. Yes.
Thank you, Prime Minister. It's Keith Anderson, Chief Executive at Scottish Power. So a couple of weeks ago, we completed a £1.3 billion investment into the future of renewables in UK supply chain. And that's hugely thanks to the extension of the capital allowances programme. I've got another £10 billion ready to go. And I suppose the biggest challenge and opportunity is how do we make sure that goes into UK supply chain? And so what is it we as an industry and the government working together can do to ensure we grow and secure UK supply chain?
Yeah, Keith, thank you, and congratulations and thank you for that investment. And you operate in a sector, which many of you do, which is, again, something we should be really proud of. And just take offshore wind, right, one of the examples of one of your investments. We have the world's largest offshore wind farm in the UK. Now, you think that's pretty neat, but not only do we have the largest offshore wind farm, we have the second largest and the third largest. And I think the fourth largest, right, as well, Keith, right? So that is a sign of our strength in that particular industry. Now, how do we do it? Well, we need regulatory frameworks that you can plan on. So whether it's in offshore wind with CFDs, what we're now rolling out in carbon capture and storage and other areas, I think businesses like yours want long-term certainty in these transition industries, and we need to get our regulatory frameworks right to give you the certainty to invest. And right now, actually, Grant Shapps is all-day conference with other leaders about the North Sea and how do we cooperate properly. So this is important to us. But we need to get our domestic regulatory frameworks right. We're really good at that. Right? Graham's here. He can talk to you about that. But our CFD system that we use for offshore wind that helped bring the price of offshore wind down from whatever it was, 140 quid a megawatt hour a decade ago to 40 quid today, that didn't happen by accident. That happened because we got it right, and then it got copied around the world. So we need to replicate that in all these other areas. You heard what the Chancellor had to say in the budget about carbon capture and storage. That's the next big growth industry. Something like 80% of Europe's carbon capture storage capacity is, I think, here in the North Sea. Huge advantage that we start with over everybody else that we need to capitalize on. So once again, it's Scottish voices that are going around the world telling everyone else how to do it. We did that before, we'll do it again. But also in areas like small modular reactors, I want to make sure that, again, we capitalize on that innovation. It goes back to what I was talking about before. How do we create the new products and services of the future, getting the R&D right for that? The last thing I'd say is, we did something unusual. We created a government lending institution when I was Chancellor. It's called the UK Infrastructure Bank. That's not always been our tradition, but once we left the EU, there was funding that used to come from the EIB. We wanted to look at that and see if it was worth replicating, and we thought it was. But we were going to do it better in a UK way. And I hope John Flint is here from the UK. I mean, he's waving at the back, right? So, if you guys are in that industry, you should go talk to John today. Because we capitalised the UK Infrastructure Bank with about £20 billion in capital, equity, and guarantees. And John's job is to leverage in money from all of you, help fill some of those financing gaps, particularly in the clean energy transition and in levelling up. So I think one of the first investments John made was in port infrastructure in Teesside, right? Making sure that we can take advantage of doing more manufacturing here in the free port in Teesside that we created so that we can then start manufacturing more and exporting it around the world. That's why we can work with you, partner, and you can leverage, hopefully, the UK Infrastructure Bank's balance sheet so that we can bring about the transition that we all want to see, reduce carbon emissions, but crucially, do that in a way that creates jobs here at home. Right, who is next? Got lots of hands up. Shall we go yes, sir?
Prime Minister. Vishal Marius, CEO and founder here at Quantexa. My question to you is, how can the UK government support the acceleration for startup scale-ups here in the UK, both for our near-term goals domestically, but also internationally?
Yeah, Vishal, look, this is a burning question, right? When we sit here and look at it, we know we are brilliant at starting up businesses, right? We're absolutely brilliant. We've got phenomenal founders, phenomenal entrepreneurs, phenomenal research base at our universities, and we've got a tax system with EIS, SEIS, and everything else and that is getting capital to those businesses. But we all know, we sit there and we watch these businesses grow and scale, and then we all sit there and say, well, hang on, how do we keep making them grow and scale? And what are the barriers that are holding them back, right? So look, one is I want to make sure that people is not a barrier. Right? And that's why I talked about unapologetically having a visa regime, a migration regime, which means the world's best and brightest talent can come here easily, want to come here easily. And that's what we're delivering. So we have a new scale-up visa, for example, right? Particularly for high-growth companies, making it easy. The other visa we just created is a high-potential individual visa. This is incredible. But if you graduate from a global top 50 university, right, anywhere in the world, you graduate from one of these universities, we're going to say, great, you're interesting, we'd like you here. And we say, just come here. You don't need a job. You don't need to know what you're doing when you come here, but you can come here for a couple of years and then figure it out. And then after that, we want you to go onto a proper visa. But that is us saying a big, please come here, we're open for business sign that will help you attract the talent that you need to grow those businesses. But you touched on it, though. The other thing we need to get right is the capital markets. It goes back to Venkat's question at the beginning. How do we ensure that the billions, trillions of pounds we have is being productively employed in the risk sectors, the growth sectors of our economy? Now, we're making some regulatory changes, some reforms to the pension regime to unlock some of that capital. We're making changes to our IPO rules and our listing rules to make it easier for those companies to raise capital on the public markets. But that's not going to happen. None of this is going to change it overnight. We need to keep talking to you. The Chancellor's looking at this actively. And we need to make sure that we're looking at all the things that we can do to make it easier to unlock that capital. And where the government needs to step in, we're doing that too. You saw I created the Future Fund in the pandemic. We created a Future Fund Breakthrough to help with some of those scale-up funds, scale-up firms. And now we've got the British Business Bank, which is looking particularly in areas like life sciences or quantum. So deep tech, more capital-intensive businesses that need to stay private for longer. We want to make sure that those businesses have capital too. And not only are we doing it, we've attracted money from sovereign wealth funds internationally to come partner with us in the life sciences investment program because they see the opportunities here. So we're all out around the world talking to these other governments and countries saying, come partner with us to provide that capital because our generation of companies will be the ones that transform the world. That's what we need to do. But look, that's something we all collectively need to do because the tough thing is culture. How do you change culture and risk appetite? It's hard to do that overnight. We need to work together to change that. And I think it will be a virtuous circle as people see that it's working. It will become easier to do. Right, next. Okay, let's try and go somewhere towards the back. I've got someone waving their hand energetically over there.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for your remarks today. I'm Herman Narula. I'm CEO of Improbable. It's a tech company in the UK. We've attracted a bunch of investment, and we work in the metaverse space. And we love your approach to these problems. In the last month or so, large language models have been unleashed onto the world. They've grown at an exponential rate, unprecedented in the history of the launch of any product ever. They've disrupted every aspect of my business, and I thought I was a deep tech company, let alone other industries. A lot of us in technology and in the investment community are concerned that the country needs a national capability, especially when considering issues like defense and data security. What is your strategy and view on this technology, which is already shaking so many people to their core? Right. Excellent question. I assume we didn't set this question up, but it's a very good question. Now, I don't know, actually, I'm looking around. So we're announcing something today on that. I think you're right. AI has the potential to transform every aspect of our lives. We all know that. Claire is here from Barclays, and we were talking about that this morning. Now, you're right about having some sovereign capability around the entire stack, right, of foundation models. So, I'll be talking a little bit about that later today, but your broad point is absolutely right. What is our sovereign capability, particularly as it relates to national security, but also all elements
of the stack, right? So we also need to think about compute power, which is why the Chancellor talked about putting 900 million, isn't it, Jeremy? 900 million pounds towards exascale computing to make sure, as you know, that the computing demands for these things are just growing also exponentially. So it's making sure that we keep pace with that. So look, I'm not being coy, but like we're imminently about to say something about exactly the point that you raised, because it's a really important one. But rest assured we're on it. We talk to not just business, but the defence community as well, to make sure the UK is well positioned, not just to capitalise on the opportunities that we all are aware of, but also to protect ourselves against the risks that the technology might pose. And we're going to have to do that in partnership, right? Again, as I say, this is not just us doing it on our own. This is us working in partnership with you. And we're very lucky in this country, we can draw on the world's best talent in these areas to help us figure this out and get it right. Not many other countries have the benefit of that. Right, should we go over here? Yes, Miss, I can see, I think, there. Can we get a microphone? Yes.
Hi, thank you, Prime Minister. My name is Nadia Sood. I'm the CEO of a UK fintech called Credit Enable, and we also operate in the Indian market. India is the fastest growing economy in the world right now, and we're living in an interconnected world. So I'd like to hear more about what the government's doing to strengthen the UK-India corridor, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Yes. Well, I'm trying to take more family holidays in the first instance. But look, no. So you're absolutely right. India represents one of a massive market opportunity. Many of your companies here will already have a trading relationship with India, and rightly so. If you look at where are the large middle classes in the world growing, they're growing there. So for all our fantastic UK consumer goods companies, it's an obvious market to expand in. That's why Kemi is hard at work engaging with the Indian government to see where we can make more progress on trade discussions that have been going on for a while. I spoke to Prime Minister Modi about it just recently. We're keen to see if we can make that work, right? Because of the obvious opportunity that it poses. Actually, and also, I talk about goods, but your business and others, India's economy is like ours, where there are very big service sectors as well. So there's a lot of complementarity in what we would get out of a trade agreement. That said, that trade agreements everywhere are never, they're not easy, right? Kemi deserves enormous credit for getting this CPTPP over the line, as I talked about earlier. They're not easy, and I've always said I never want to rush these things and get them wrong, right? We need to take the time to get them right, to make sure that they work for all of you, work for British consumers. But rest assured we're at it at all levels of government. I'm talking to the Prime Minister about it. And it's part of a broader relationship with India, which is growing. And it's not just on the economic side, but on a range of areas, we're doing more work together, and that's a good thing. Because look, that's the growth in the world, the center of gravity is shifting. And we need to make sure that in government, we are connecting all of you to the growth parts of the global economy. And that's, again, being outside of the EU means we can be a bit more nimble on these things. We couldn't do these things always inside the EU. We can move quicker now. We can be more agile. You saw that with CPTPP. We'll make progress with India and other countries as well. But look, that's what we're doing. And when there's more to say, we'll come back and say to you. And in the meantime, all of you that have helped feed in to Kemi and her team on the things that you'd like to see out of that trade agreement, things that are important to you, please keep doing that. That means that we can listen, we can act on it, and hopefully make sure that we get it right. Great, all right, I'm going to try and go. I've got somebody there, yes.
Hi, Prime Minister Rishi Oak North. We spoke a little bit earlier about startups, scale-ups. Obviously, in this room, we have many major businesses represented, a lot of innovation companies also represented. But if you look at the large number of small, medium-sized companies, and if you take the 5.5 million of SMEs in this country, really the 500,000 which aren't micro companies, but yet lead to so much of the productivity and employment growth in this country, we feel like generally it's an underrepresented contingent at events like this, and not necessarily getting the airtime that they need within government.
Right, well, Rishi, thank you for that. Look, I'm a passionate believer, as the government is, in backing small and medium-sized companies, right? That's the background I came from. My mum, I talked about her a lot last summer. She was a pharmacist, but she was a small businesswoman, right? Not huge business, but that's what she did. That's how I was brought up, right? And I saw the power of that small business in Southampton to provide jobs for people. I saw what it took to run a business like that, do the books, do the cash flow, and that's my background, right? And that story is replicated up and down the country, right? The majority of employment in our country happens in small and medium-sized businesses, not in large companies. And we've got a good mix, actually, today of people represented, which I'm glad about. But look, that's always at the forefront of our mind. And when it comes to things like regulation, for example, right, we're very conscious that regulation is something that is more problematic for small businesses, right? Often easy for many of you in this room. You've got a department, they'll deal with it. But we want to make sure small businesses can participate. I did a LinkedIn Live this morning, and actually there's a great question about procurement, for example, right? Government spends something like £300 billion a year on procurement. And how do we get more of that money to small businesses? It's a really practical way for us to demonstrate that we care about this. And that's what we're doing. Again, it's another Brexit opportunity. Outside of the EU, we can design procurement rules in a way that suits us. So for the first time, I think Kemi will correct me if I'm wrong, but for the first time we've got a duty on the government to focus and look at small businesses and their needs. One of the bits of feedback we had back was when you apply for lots of government contracts, you have to keep filling out all your details again and again and again and create a new profile for your small business multiple times. So we streamlined all of that. We got rid of about 350 bits of form filling, replaced it with one profile that you create that you can use then for any government contract that you want to bid for. And then lastly, cash flow, right? What is the biggest, I mean, you know this because you lend to these businesses, right? What's the number one challenge for small and medium-sized businesses is cash flow. So we've made sure that in government procurement and down that supply chain of government procurement, we've moved to a 30-day cash flow payback for all the contracts. So that's a kind of very practical, transformative thing that will make it more easy for small businesses to bid for things, but also, I hope, demonstrates in a pretty significant way our desire to support the small businesses in our economy, as long as alongside all the great things that the Chancellor will keep doing and has done in budgets to support small businesses. I mean, think about employment taxes. Something like 40%, right, I think, Jeremy, of all small businesses don't pay any employer's national insurance, because successive Conservative chancellors, starting with George, Jeremy, me, in between, have raised the employment allowance, right? So that we just take those small businesses out of paying employment taxes. Ditto on business rates, right? Several 100,000 small and medium-sized businesses in the hospitality, and retail and leisure space in particular, now don't pay any business rates, because we care about those small businesses and the contribution they make to our high streets, our town centres, our communities. So look, where we can, we're always going to try and support small businesses because, like my mum's business, like many of you started that way, they represent the backbone of our country, our economy, our communities, and this government will always support them. Right, I've got lots of hands. Where should we go? Let's come back down to the front. Yes.
We're about to have a squabble over the microphone. Jerry Murphy, Prime Minister. I'm chairman of Burberry. And firstly, I want to thank you for hosting this. It's great to see a Conservative government, obviously more business friendly than some predecessor administrations. And it's good to be here, and thank you. And thank you for listening to us. Just to bring the conversation down to a more granular level, Burberry is a FTSE 100 company. We are, by an order of magnitude, the largest UK fashion brand, and we trade globally. About 90% of our business is export. It is somewhat perverse that on the day that we left the single market, a decision by, I think it was by you as Chancellor, to remove the VAT refunds for tourists made the UK the least attractive shopping destination in Europe. Now that is the case today. Virtually every other major destination in Europe offers VAT refunds. Now we can see in our business, because we trade in Paris, in Milan, and in Munich, we can see the rate of recovery from COVID in those markets as well as the UK. And the UK is by far the weakest recovery of all those major markets. We are actively exporting business as a result of that policy to our continental competitors. So I would ask you, in the spirit of making Britain a more competitive environment, in the spirit of fostering growth, and not just in the luxury industries, it knocks on to travel, to hotels, airlines, airports, to reconsider that decision. We told the Treasury at the time that we know our customers. We literally have their email addresses and phone numbers, and we could predict with some certainty what the behaviour would be if this policy was enacted. and so it's playing out. We didn't see much impact on our business for the last couple of years because there wasn't much tourism. Now there is, it's coming back in spades. So I would ask you and the Chancellor to revisit this. It was a bad decision, made for the right reasons. I understand the fiscal imperatives, but we would urge you to look at this. Leaving the EU has had a significant friction effect on trade, hopefully not forever for all the reasons you've mentioned, but it is the case today that it's a drag on growth. So we would ask you to look at this specific one. This is a spectacular own goal, and one that can be reversed by a decision from you or from the Chancellor. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's why we're here. We're here to listen, right? When I had Jeremy's job, I made it a policy not to talk about tax policy live in front of lots of people, and I think he'd probably prefer it if I didn't do that either. But look, we'll take that away, and rather than rehash all the details for it now, I'm sure actually we can pick it up later in the day. But there were good reasons for it, and I think we'll happily see all the data because we're always happy to look at what's happening on the ground and see if things are panning out as we expected them to, or not. But your broader point, though, is an important one about listening and engagement. And hopefully you guys can see from today's event that we really take this seriously. I'm here, 20 other ministers from the government are here, and we're here all day because we want to listen. And that's exactly what we want to have that conversation. This is not, and Kemi said it right at the beginning, right? We don't get everything right. Of course we know that. Nobody does. And we want to make sure that we're listening, we're learning, we're adapting can deliver on the promise that we all see ahead of us for our country. And I hope you have a good day where you can come forward with your practical ideas. We will take them away and engage with them properly and constructively and make sure that we can, if we can't do everything that you want, at least we can explain to you why we're doing that. But I think crucially, we've got to just have that conversation. And what I'm really grateful to you as well, we've got almost 250 incredibly senior leaders from across corporate Britain here today. Something like this has never happened before. Right? This gathering, as it is unprecedented. This is not what governments do, right? And hopefully it demonstrates to all of you that we take this very seriously. We are here to listen and engage. And I'll also just actually at that moment flag that I've recently appointed a new business special advisor, Frank Prendergast. Many of you will know him. He's had an incredibly successful and experienced career at Morgan Stanley over 3 decades with a global perspective. Frank is in Downing Street alongside me, and make sure you see him, get in touch with him. We want all of you to know that whether it's government ministers, whether it's Frank to me, you have a route in, that you can talk to us about your concerns, you can pitch your ideas to us, and then we can respond and engage with you, because that's how we're going to deliver on my promise at the beginning, making this the best place to start, scale, or grow a business anywhere in the world. Right, we're okay for time? Yes, good, okay, yes.
Hi, T.S. Anil, CEO of Monzo. As you know, we're a bank that serves 7.5 million retail customers and 250,000 small businesses here in the UK. My question is related to how the government can support businesses like us that have global ambitions beyond the UK shores. And there's obviously a broad range of things that are possible with trade partnerships and so on. But that list should include tactical things like allowing us to passport our licenses from the UK to other jurisdictions, which we cannot do today. Our UK license is really only for the UK today. So what's the range of things that you're thinking about to create the next generation of global businesses that are birthed here?
Yeah, thanks, TS, and thanks for everything that you do to support small businesses and customers. Now, this talks about what I talked about in my opening remarks about being open to trade, right, and forging those relationships with other countries. Because unlike lots of countries, we're very fortunate that we have a very global connected economy, right? Trade is a bigger part of our GDP than it is for many countries, and many of our companies are instinctively very outward-looking because what we do is really good, and naturally you should, and we want you to sell it around the world. So that's why us having good dialogue and relationships around the world is important. So with financial services, we're in the midst of negotiating an MOU with Switzerland, for example, right, on financial services. That represents one of the most ambitious financial services partnerships that anyone's ever tried to do. And actually, we will get that done, and that will open up markets and opportunity for many of you in the room. I talked about CPTPP. We've got more services in our agreement with Japan. We talked about India already. But it's all those types of things. It's about us working around the world, being outward-looking, negotiating those agreements, getting those mutual recognition, not just in financial services, but in services more generally. Recognition of qualifications. It sounds incredibly simple, but actually if a country recognizes a professional license in architecture or something like that, it means all our amazing people here in professional services can then do what they do around the world. And that's what we're working at. So part of our trade thing is you don't have to necessarily always do the big trade deal, right? Those are complicated and take time. But where we can find individual sectors, individual licenses or qualifications that we can get mutual recognition for, that's a smart and sensible thing to do. Often doesn't take as long, but can drive growth and open up opportunities. So it's a focus of our trade policy is to do lots of that. Doesn't always get the attention, but that is practical and effective alongside also trying to do the big, more complex trade deals. All right, next. Yes, we'll try and go somewhere at the back. I can't quite see, but we'll try and be equitable. Is there someone over there?
Thank you, Prime Minister, and very good morning to you. My name is Vibhor Gupta. I'm the founder of Pangea Data. We were founded in London, but we quickly grow in the US, and we now have an outpost in South San Francisco. My question is, how can you help early businesses like ours scale up in other markets and also be competitive, or at least be able to compete? Coming from the UK, sometimes when you're in a big country like America, it is very hard to stand out, and you try your best. Does the government have a strategy to help us do that? And if so, how?
How?
Thank you.
Yes, we do. It's called GREAT. It's called the GREAT campaign. And we have a fantastic team of people from business who serve on our council. And that campaign, that organisation, funded by government, their job is to promote UK and UK businesses around the world. And they do it in a really interesting and attractive way. We're keen to do more of it. So what I do when you go back, just go Google it, have a look at it, and hopefully it can help and support you. It's embedded with our embassies around the world, where we're doing a much better job than we used to of joining up the diplomatic and the corporate side. We just launched, to give you an example of it, actually, we just launched a campaign in the West. It's very specifically on the West Coast, right, in Silicon Valley, just talking about our companies, what they were doing. Some of our ministers were out there the other week, and it was a huge success, right? And there's, what's called Unicorn, what's it called? Yeah, Unicorn Kingdom, right? So there's a whole campaign around it. We're in the process of doing it. And actually the feedback, I've had all these messages from people, the feedback from people out there who have all started to notice all these things and are feeding back to us. And we've tried doing it in a slightly more funky way this time, and it definitely seems to be working. And we're going to do more of that. So look, plug into that. There's lots of private sector people who are involved in it, so there's probably someone you know who you can also talk to as well as us. But that's it. It's a great campaign. We've reinvigorated it. We're funding it. And it's going from strength to strength to promote UK and UK businesses around the world. But have a look at that, and I think it will really help. Right, I know we're running out of time, so we'll take the last couple. Right, yes.
Morning, Prime Minister. Helena Morrissey. I chair a number of companies in the finance sector, and I've also done a lot of work on diversity and inclusion. You mentioned earlier, quite rightly, of course, the importance of having an entrepreneurial mindset throughout the country to help Britain grow, but also I think we need all the talent. We need everyone to feel they'll be respected and included if they join industry. It's a bit of the elephant in the room, but we're meeting as horrible allegations swirl around the CPI. I'm not expecting you to comment on that, but I am personally worried that this might put women off joining industry. And I wondered if you're concerned about that, and if so, if the government's doing anything about it, or might help in the future as the dust settles on this whole horrible scandal. Thank you.
Look, Helena, thank you for everything that you've done in this space, because it's really important, right? I have 2 young girls, I have 2 daughters. I want to make sure that they grow up in an economy and a society where every opportunity is available for them. And that's what we all want to do, right? And that's why when it came particularly to entrepreneurship, which you mentioned, we asked Alison Rose, who will be known to many of you in this room, a few years ago to do a review into female entrepreneurship. Alison's report is superb. Actually, it's really worth reading. It brings to light, shines a light on some of the barriers that were there, and lots of recommendations for us about what we can do to try and address some of those things, which we are now doing. And actually, of course we're not there yet, of course we're not, but we're making progress. So if you look at the number of companies started by women in the last year, 2022, that we have data for, it's 4 times, I think actually 2 or 3 times more than it was a couple of years before. So it's heading in the right direction, and that's because there's a range of things we're doing. I was talking about it again this morning, actually, on the LinkedIn Live, because someone asked a very similar question. And I asked her, she was a female entrepreneur, and I asked her, what does she think the barriers are? One of them was finance, and whether it's harder for female entrepreneurs to raise capital for their businesses. That's something that Alison had spoken to us about. One of the reasons that we extended SEIS, our tax relief scheme for investing in very early stage businesses, to 3 years, because that would disproportionately benefit female founders. But also she talked about networks and mentorship as being something that was really important. And so we're looking at that, right? It's not an easy thing for the government to try and fix, but I think that's something all of us working together, if we're a little bit more alive to what some of the barriers are, how can we work together to put in place those networks and that mentorship to support our female leaders to continue to grow and develop and build their businesses? Because I share the ambition that you have, right? We want to make sure that no matter your background, no matter whether you're a woman or a man, whether you're from a different part of the country, whatever your socioeconomic background is, that we want to spread opportunity around, right? There's so much talent in our country, and we're missing out if we're not giving everyone an opportunity to fulfill their potential. So that's what we're going to try and do, and pleasure to work with you on it and hear all your ideas about how we can deliver that together, because I think that's something that we owe to our kids and our grandkids, to make sure that they grow up in a society where that's possible and they can do everything they want to do regardless of who they are. So I know that you share that ambition with me, and I know that together we can deliver it. Right, okay, I think we're almost out of time, so let's take last one. Yes, sir, here.
Thank you, Prime Minister. My name is Torben of LifeBit, and as a precision medicine software company that works with wonderful UK institutions like Genomics England and then exports that around the world, we're obviously delighted by you cutting red tape in things like procurement, but at the same time slightly concerned when it comes to the single market, which is one of our biggest trading partners. 80% of our revenue comes from abroad, and in the regulatory space, maintaining alignment when it comes to things like GDPR, etc., so that we and our technologies remain compatible with that very large market, which is right across the channel. It's very important. So what is your view on that, kind of like cutting red tape on the one side, but staying compatible to our single biggest addressable single market next door?
Yeah, I think we can do all of that, right? Like we have, as a result of the negotiations, I think the deepest comprehensive bilateral trade deal with the EU and the TCA that more than any other trade deal anywhere else provides very good access. But alongside that, in those growth industries, right? And you mentioned life sciences, that's one of our massive growth industries. One of the chancellors rightly highlighted 5 growth industries. And George Freeman is here as well, our science minister. Like that's an obvious area where we can look at how we can make this the best place to do drug discovery in the world, right? We should be looking at the clinical trials directive. And in fact, all of you in the industry tell me we should be looking at it and reform it to make sure that it is easier and faster to do drug discovery here. Building on the advantages we already have, right? We have world-class research base in our universities, as well as all these great companies. But we also have data sets that don't exist anywhere in the world because of the NHS and elsewhere, the biobank, right? So I think, I look at that and I just see that as massive opportunity for us. And particularly in life sciences, because of the work that we're doing, and that's George's professional background, right? He knows it inside out, and you should talk to him afterwards, right? Because this is one of those areas when we saw during the pandemic, right? Look how the MHRA moved at pace. It was agile. That was beneficial to us. Look what we're developing here. We've got fantastic companies like yours. I don't know if Gordon's here from Oxford Nanopore and all these other things, right? Oh, there he is, right? Waving, perfect, right? Like we need to make sure that more of that happens here. We already have the biggest life sciences sector in Europe, right? And we need to just maintain that advantage. And that's about a regulatory regime that is pro-innovation. And that's what we're delivering. And that's great, not just because it's good for the economy, right? That will create lots of jobs. It will create lots of tax revenue. That's all marvelous and wonderful, right? I mean, just think what we're doing, right? Like, we're keeping people alive, right? That's what you do, right? And we can do that here. That means British people are going to be the first recipients of some of this new, novel, life-saving treatments. Look how mRNA is, completely changing. Look how AI is changing drug discovery, right? So I look at that as just one of the most exciting opportunities ahead of us, and I think, God, isn't it amazing that here in the UK, we're literally already one of the best people at it. Yes, we need to make sure that we continue to have access to selling these things into Europe, which I think we will, right? Why would you not want to buy whatever we create here? But we want to make sure that we create it here in the first place. You and everyone else in your industry is going to do that for us. It's going to be amazing to see what you do over the next 5, 10 years. And that is a good positive note to end on, because that story is one that is replicated in pretty much all of your businesses in all of our sectors. We're really lucky with the talent that we've got in this country, which we've talked about. We're really lucky with the quality of our entrepreneurs and business people, because all of you are brilliant, right? And I hope that you feel that you've now got a government that is engaging with you, that is listening to you. That's what today is all about. We want your ideas. We want your feedback. Because if we can work together on this, I think the potential for this country is limitless, right? Not only can we create that growing economy, which is going to put jobs in every part of it, create the prosperity and the opportunity, we can literally transform how we live for the better, right? That is the promise that is there ahead of us, and that's what we can deliver together. So thank you for being here today. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.